Footfalls. Footfalls is a play by Samuel Beckett. It was written in English between 2 March and December 1975. Billie Whitelaw, for whom the piece had been written, played May whilst Rose Hill voiced the mother. Synopsis. The play is in 4 parts. Each opens with the sound of a bell. After this, the lights fade up to reveal an illuminated strip along which a woman May paces back and forth. In each part, the light will be somewhat darker than in the preceding one. Therefore, it is darkest when the strip is lit up without May at the very end. Correspondingly, the bell gets slightly softer each time. Beckett introduced a dim spot on face during halts at our right and L left so that May's face would be visible during her monologues. The play has a very musical structure, and timing is critical. The walking should be like a metronome, Beckett instructed. One length must be measured in exactly 9 seconds. These lifelong stretches of walking, he told his German May Hildegard Schmal, are the center of the play. Everything else is secondary. To ensure that every step could be heard, sandpaper was attached to the soles of Billie Whitelaw's soft ballet slippers during the as she covers the 9 paces 7 in earlier printed texts. She hugs herself, the arms crossed, with the hands clasping the shoulders in front. When you walk, you slump together. When you speak, you straighten up a bit. Schmal asked Beckett if May's posture was supposed to express fear. No, not fear. It expresses that May is there exclusively for herself. She is isolated, one of a long line of Beckett protagonists whose name begins with an M. May is a woman in her 40s who should, however, appear ageless according to Beckett. She paces back and forth on a strip of bare landing outside her dying, if not already dead, mother's room. A vertical ray of light not in the printed text suggests a door barely ajar. The woman, clearly a shadow of her former self, wears tattered nightwear and has a ghostly pallor. Beckett said one could go very far towards making the costume quite unrealistic. Unreal it could, however, also be an old dressing gown worked like a cobweb. The adjective ghostly is used frequently by Beckett himself and others to describe various aspects of Footfalls. The play significantly only has a semblance of a plot. May's mother is only ever heard. We learn that she is apparently 90 years old and in poor health. The more likely truth is that she is a creation of May's mind, especially when one examines Beckett's earlier drafts. Part I. As she paces, May and her mother carry on a conversation. They go through the daily routine by rote. Both voices are low and slow throughout. May asks her mother if she requires tending in any way. To each request the mother says, yes, but it is too soon. The full list of comforts offered to the suffering mother carry a biblical resonance: dressings, sponge, lip moistening, and prayer. The suffering daughter, on the other hand, paces on the bare floorboards nailed as in a cross. In the church later she paces across the arms of the cross. May asks her mother what age she is. She's told that she is in her 40s, but only after May has first let her mother know that she is 90. The mother asks May, will you never have done, revolving it all in your poor mind? The pacing back and forth is an externalization of this inner unresolved issue. It all was a title Beckett was considering before he opted for Footfalls, though we never discover what it might be. May or may not be a ghost, but she is undoubtedly a haunted individual. The umbilical cord has clearly never been severed. And May and V voice create a dialogue which is simultaneously time present and time past, for, although the mother's voice is an echo from the past, May is speaking to her in the endless present dramatized before our eyes. Quite literally in Footfalls, the past is in the present. Simply put, they are living in the past. Part Roman 2, Min 2, U, Ten 2. In the second part, the mother's voice addresses the audience directly. She tells us that she too is watching her daughter along with us, literally through the corridor wall. We learn that the turning point in May's life, be it happened in girlhood when other girls her age were out at lacrosse, she had already begun her obsessive pacing. From that time on, significantly, she has not ventured outside. In the beginning the hall had been carpeted, but May had asked her mother to have it taken up. When questioned, the child had said because she needed to hear the feet, however faint they fall. The motion alone is not enough. The apparition in the story in part Roman 3, on the other hand, makes no sound. Cause none, at least, to be heard. In an earlier draft, the voice tells the audience my voice is in her mind, suggestive of the fact that the mother actually is only a figment of May's imaginings. This is borne out by the fact that voice tells the story of a girl who called her mother, instead of simply talking about a girl who called me. This is the kind of slip May might make if she was narrating the mother's part herself. We also learn how May sleeps, in snatches with her head bowed against the wall, which is reminiscent of Marion Watt. Beckett explains why the mother interrupts herself in the sentence in the old home, the same where she paused, and then continues the same where she began. She was going to say. Part Roman 3, in 3, he. In part Roman 2, the mother speaks of the daughter in the third part, the daughter of the mother, in a way that is exactly parallel. One must sense the similarities of both narratives, explained Beckett, not so much from the text as from the style, from the way that the text is spoken. In a manner similar to mouth and not I, the shift into third-person narrative and the indefinite pronoun work both to objectify the text, making it into a separate entity that seems disconnected from personal history. In that sense, this part can be subdivided into 4 sections. After each section, May halts for a time and then resumes pacing. Sequel. Well, the semblance. The description of the spectre is similar to how the audience sees May, a tangle of tatters, and her pacing is comparable except that the ghost paces along the crossbeam whereas May paces the length of the stage. A residual haunting is where the entity does not seem to be cognizant of any living beings and performs the same repetitive act. It often is the reenactment of a tragic event, although it may sometimes be a very mundane act that was repeated often in life. It is generally not considered an actual ghost, but some form of energy that remains in a particular location. The ghost goes about their business oblivious to the world of the living, what Beckett meant by the expression being for herself. Night by night ghosts pace their prescribed path, offering no explanation to the viewers as to why they reenact the same scene over and over. The answers, or at least best guesses, have to come from research done by the living in the real world. The apparition is by no means invisible, and can be seen in a certain light. It brings to mind the quote Beckett prefaced film with, "Est percipi," a Latin dictum meaning to be is to be perceived. Additionally, a ghost does not have to be dead. The word can be defined as a mere shadow or semblance, a trace. He's a ghost of his former self. Amy and Mrs. Winter. May makes up a story about a woman, Amy, an anagram of May and her mother, a Mrs. Winter. Although he knew a Mrs. Winter, in real life the name would have been chosen to reflect the coldness of his own Winter's tale, just as he changed the south door of the church in the manuscript to the north door at a late stage for the same reason. The name Amy is another pun, Amy. Mrs. Winter has become aware of something strange at evensong and questions her daughter about it while at supper. She asks if Amy had seen anything strange during the service, but the daughter insists she did not because she was not there, a point her mother takes issue with because she is convinced that she heard her distinctly say Amen. This is not a dramatization of the event that traumatized May, however, as that happened in girlhood, and Amy is described in the text as scarcely a girl anymore. The daughter only knows the voice of the mother. One can recognize the similarity between the two from the sentences in their narratives, from the expression. The strange voice of the daughter comes from the mother. The not enough in the mother's May becomes Amy, becomes Amy, becomes Amy, becomes Amy. Just as the light from part I to part Roman 3 becomes constantly darker, the tone quieter, so the walking gets slower. When she begins to walk, there's a small hesitation, as though she were unsure if she should walk or not. Beckett pointed out that on her last walk along the strip of light, her energy runs out after 3 paces, and she has to wait there until enough vitality returns to drag herself to the end of the light. As the play ends, Mrs. Winter speaks to Amy the very words spoken to May by her mother, "Will you never have done?" Revolving it all up until this point, May has identified who has. Can May be the ghost and be Amy? Be Amy, 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 be Amy. Yes, if each reflects a different aspect of who she is. Part Roman 4. In the final section, there is no one on stage. The bell chimes, the lights come up and then fade out. The final 10 seconds with no trace of May is a crucial reminder that May was always not there or only there as a trace. May, like the Amy of her story, is simply not there, strange or otherwise. We hear nothing, we see nothing. Absence is the only presence. As Beckett told Billie Whitelaw when she asked him if May was dead, he replied, "Let's just say you're not all there." This has been interpreted by many to mean that May is not dead. But it should be remembered that a ghost has a curious relation to finitude, which means it is never entirely unearthly or out of this world. Ghosts are traditionally tied to places, condemned for a certain time to walk the earth. In an interview with Jonathan Kalb, Billie Whitelaw describes May's journey in Footfalls. May gets lower and lower and lower, until it's like a little pile of ashes on the floor at the end, and the light comes up and she's gone. James Knowlson and John Pilling in frescoes of the Skull P227 come close to summarizing the entire play in a single sentence. Background: Beckett's mother, also called May, had difficulty sleeping through the night, and there were often times when she paced the floor of her room or wandered through the darkened house as silently as one of the ghosts which she swore haunted it. Hildegard Schmoll wanted to know how was the figure of May to be understood. In the 30s, he said, C.G. Jung, the psychologist, once gave a lecture in London and told of a female patient who was being treated by him. Jung said he wasn't able to help this patient, and for this, according to Beckett, he gave an astonishing explanation. This girl wasn't living, she existed but didn't actually live. Jung does not. Beckett recognized in this psychological dilemma an example of his own womb fixation, arguing forcefully that all his behavior, from the simple inclination to stay in bed to his deep-seated need to pay frequent visits to his mother, were all aspects of an improper birth. The implication in Footfalls is that May has remained in the imaginary womb and that womb is. Among the myths underlying psychic life, Jung favored that of the hero who has to stand up to a devouring great mother figure threatening to drag him back into symbiotic unconsciousness. His entry into her womb/tomb and successful reemergence constitutes his own renewal and transformation. Only 2 years before writing Footfalls, Beckett had also met the daughter of an old friend who described to him graphically her own depression, distress and extreme agoraphobia, telling him how, unable to face the world, she used to pace relentlessly up and down in her apartment. It is not unreasonable to assume there may be an association between the character of May and this girl. If we viewed May's pacing from above, we would see the tracing on the stage floor of a tremendously elongated variation of the figure's 8 turned on its side. Beckett was also indebted to the French psychologist Pierre Janet for his conception of hysterical behavior. In his overview of Janet's work, Robert Woodworth in his Contemporary Schools of Psychology, a work Beckett read, pays particular attention to Janet's description of the hysterical paralysis of one arm, which Beckett incorporated into May's posture. There are a number of analogies between Footfalls and Janet's work. With a patient called Irene, he lists the deep sleep, the sleepwalking, the hearing of the mother's voice, the terrifying extreme of Irene's fabulation, the drama of daily reenactment, of pathological memory possessing the body and mind of the traumatized hysteric. Whitelaw said she felt like a moving musical Edvard Munch painting. In reality, her pose creates a striking parallel with the picture of the Virgin of the Annunciation by Antonello da Messina, which Beckett had seen 40 years earlier. Beckett, too, was very familiar with the work of Munch, and May's pose is also reminiscent of Munch's Madonna. Munch described the work in this way: now life and death join hands. The chain is joined that ties the thousands of past generations To the thousands of generations to come he painted a woman in warm hues, and a K. Norris observes, her torso bare and her head tilted back, with long reddish hair flowing around her body. Her eyes are closed, her lips slit. Reception. In 1998, David Benedict of The Independent referred to Footfalls as a finer, more dramatically distilled work than Waiting for Godot 1953. Related works, Sid works. Maddie Rooney remembers one of those new mind doctors lecturing on a little girl patient. The trouble with her was she had never been really born, all that Fall Faber and Faber 36, 37, and Malone feels. He is far already from the world that parts at last its labia and lets me go. Yes, he affirms, an old fetus, that's what I am now, hoar and impotent. Footfalls also anticipates the key ritual that 5 years later will possess the old woman of ill seen, ill said, the long pacing to and fro in the gloom, ill seen, ill said. Faber and Faber, p. 47. References equals